Thank you very much. Dominic Raab.
Thank you, Good morning, Secretary of State. Good morning, Mr. Robbins.
I should let you to do some work, shouldn't I?
Carry on.
He hasn't nudged me yet. So.
He's tried. Very wise.
I'm sitting a bit further away. You know.
One of the so-called risks of the negotiations, whether there's a deal or no deal, is the impact of tariffs or any form of barrier on parts coming in and out of the manufacturing process that's conducted in the UK. And it's been interesting as we look at this as a substantial problem to hear voices like James Dyson talk about what industry can do to mitigate that risk and build up a bit of self-reliance in the UK. And I wondered the extent to which civil servants or ministers have been talking to industry chiefs like James Dyson and the extent to which there's a collaborative approach to mitigating that particular risk.
Yeah. Just looking to see if the Canadians are still here. I'll explain why in a second. Yes, look, we've met with about 360 companies in the last few months and in the last 9 months, and we had I can't remember how many round tables, and this is one of the issues that comes up. There was a view that just-in-time manufacturing techniques were seriously handicapped by having to cross a border. The reason I was looking at the Canadians, I used to operate across a border between America and Canada, with products that deteriorated very fast. So it wasn't the classical just-in-time. It was, and we have mechanisms for dealing with this. And to come back to the issue of the trusted trader, which I was giving as an example to the chairman earlier, there are methods of dealing with this in terms of the relationship with the customs authorities and how they manage it. So, for example, if you've got an organisation, let's say an aviation manufacturer with hundreds of parts to make up one engine or aircraft or whatever, or a car manufacturer, their computerised manufacturing systems pretty much trace all the parts. And so it's possible for them to have an arrangement with the customs authority that says, we know where they'll come from, they'll be audited from time to time, there may be the odd snap inspection, but generally speaking, you can get a fast transition across the border. That's the sort of thing we've been looking at.
Very good.
Does that answer your question, Matthew?
It does. In particular, I was curious to know the extent to which there is some collaboration with industry on this, because one of the answers could be the one you articulated, the other possibility or combination of them could be to try and build up our self-reliance in the production of at least some proportion of the parts that we need for some of these processes.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the thing, in the event of our optimal outcome, the only thing that sort of gets in the way is rules of origin. Really, and that's the thing you've got to look for. You've got to be able to turn around to the authorities in wherever you are exporting to, in this case the European Union, and say to them, we have a hard evidence to give you satisfaction that all of this car, or 80% of this car, or whatever the agreed proportion is made from things brought from within the European Union, or if not, these are they, and this is what the tariff should be.
Thank you. The other risk, and I'll come on to some of the opportunities, but the other risk that we are quite focused on is financial services, passporting and the like, whether the answer is passporting or regulatory equivalence. And one of the interesting points made is the £1 trillion worth of UK finance going into European companies. And my reading of some of the remarks from Michel Barnier, but also national industry bodies like the Association of German Bankers, is there is a far more emollient tone in relation to the city and UK-based finance than perhaps before the referendum. And I wondered whether you're picking that up as well in terms of the prospects for a win-win in relation to that, or at least the avoidance of lose-lose, of choking off that UK-based finance.
Yes, it bounces up and down a bit, but a progressive warming of the tone, I think, and that's partly because people, up until Christmas, really, up until the Prime Minister's speech in January, there were still people around Europe who just basically didn't think this would happen, so they weren't focusing on it. the more they focus on what's necessary, the more they see things like the German Mittelstand depends on a virtually infinite source of cheap capital from the City of London. There are symbiotic between Luxembourg financial services and London, and so on. So there are a whole series of reasons why there's a tendency to, as you say, for it to get warmer. But also bear in mind, Michel. I mean, the British press tries to sort of characterise him as some sort of bogeyman. He's a tough negotiator, but his last task in the Commission prior to this was the financial services side. It was actually, before Jonathan Hill, he was the Commissioner on Financial Services. So he understands the need to get this right and the danger to the whole entity of causing fractures.
My last question, Mr. Chair, is you mentioned the sort of warning around January or February that actually Brexit is going to happen. We've heard some talk of the sort of punishment or the price that must be paid, both on the continent and here. And we've also increasingly heard voices here talk about avoiding that and searching for win-win. And I can think of comments made by the German finance minister, other comments from Berlin, from Madrid, and also within Brussels. Are you detecting an attitudinal shift in a positive direction, or ultimately will we have to wait to get down to brass tacks in the negotiations before that's likely to emerge? I'm wondering the extent to which the national blood pressure needs to be braced for the sort of continuation of the posturing via the press, but on both sides, I suppose, or the extent to which actually the negotiations have got scope to build up a rather more positive spirit to them.
That's an incredibly complex question to answer, because the dynamics of negotiation will go hot and cold from time to time. There will be times when we disagree, and there's some pressure. But broadly speaking, I think there is. I can tell you empirically from talking to member states' foreign secretaries and finance ministers and prime ministers that there is a growing determination to get a constructive outcome. The issue is whether the member states' views make it through to the Commission, so there's a sort of institutional issue, and there'll be issues about, as the chairman raised at the beginning, was it the chairman? Or maybe it was Ms Reynolds raised early on, that we're going to need to resolve how we do this. So the first point of tension is actually how the negotiation takes place. But my general view is that this is eminently achievable because the attitude of the European states is one which will want a good long-term relationship. Even this morning, when Mr Tusk was saying things about sort of sharp things, he said, but we want to be friends. You know, we want to have an amicable long-term relationship. And that desire, that wish, that commonality of culture, that commonality of interest is what I think will drive this in the longer run, much more than any negotiating gambits we use. It'll be that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Sammy Wilson.
The